Hi, this is Debbie. Welcome back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, Urban Gardener. Hey, I got it out without hesitating that time. And we are out here right now in the garden, and I am just going through and planting some more radishes in the back. And this time I actually planted a rainbow blend of radishes. So I need to take that tag out and put that in. And then through here I had taken out some of the lettuce because we already harvested it and ate it a couple of days ago. So I went ahead and planted some more lettuce and then also some garden sage to see if I can get a little bit of garden sage up and growing. I've got a little bit in the garden already and in one pot, but definitely not enough. And it seems like that happens each and every year. I somehow don't end up with enough sage. So I'm going to go ahead and plant some more, see if we can get a little bit going so I can get some dried. And I went ahead and trimmed off the parsley because I really don't want it going to seed over here in this section because it just takes up so much space if it does that. And it is weeping quite a bit, so I'll have to water it quite a lot this evening, otherwise it could end up dying back some. I'm considering whether or not to go through and trim all of the tops on the green onions because they are just going kind of wild, and I'm wondering if I just trim them off. And I don't have a whole lot of issues with pests or anything, so I think that they would be fine if I did that. So I may go ahead and do that and get those all evened up through the fall. And now that it is, I think today is August 3rd, well, you can see the garden is just continuing on from what happens in late July. It just gets to be a jungle in here. I came out with my shears and I have been trimming up on the sunflowers. So there is some light coming through underneath the canopy of the sunflowers because they're getting really tall now on those as well. We still have kind of short sunflowers on that second round that I planted right here, but they are definitely coming on, and I do see a little bit of startings of a bloom in there. So it looks like they're going to end up being very short sunflowers, and it's probably because it's so late in the season. And I think those were the gray stripes that I planted on that second round, so we shall see. But all the sunflowers are looking absolutely beautiful. I did get in here and attempt to clean up some of the garden, get some of the weeds out, and check on these newer sunflowers, and did pull the dirt up around the fennel, the second round of fennel that I had planted, because I noticed it was kind of doing like the first fennel. And I think I've gotten the catch on fennel because my older fennel looks absolutely beautiful. I've got nice big bulbs on them, and what it is that you wait until they get about 3 or 4 inches tall, and then you start pulling the dirt up around the root base, because it tells you to plant the fennel about 1/4 of an inch deep, and it's just not deep enough, I don't think. But then again, if you plant it too deep, it probably wouldn't come up. So when it gets up about 3 or 4 inches, then go ahead and pull the dirt up around on both sides of the fennel, and just make sure you're covering up that main root, and it should start really bulbing up after that point. My first run of fennel did that after I went ahead and pulled the dirt up, because I kept looking at it and going, oh my gosh, those roots are sticking out. Why are the roots sticking out? So I went ahead and did that, and it was not even a week that they just started going crazy, getting big and all of that. And I went ahead and pulled up some more dirt around those last 3 I think they're golden sugar or whatever, cherry tomatoes. I went ahead and got the dirt pulled up around those, went ahead and hoed those, and probably need to get them staked here soon, because they're just kind of wanting to flop all over the place. And but they're definitely getting a lot bigger, getting some blooms on them. You can see some blooms on that first right there. So we'll get some tomatoes on those probably before the end of the season. And just checking on all the tomatoes and everything. The older tomatoes, definitely the super sauce tomatoes, are kind of suffering at this point because it is just so hot. We did go right back up in temperatures from the 70s that we had day before yesterday, back up into the 80s. So now it is 86, and I think tomorrow is supposed to be up into the lower 90s. And then pretty much the lower 90s, I noticed, at least what they're saying, all the way through to the 16th. So definitely getting some warm temperatures. Temperatures are beginning to get a little bit cooler at night, but all in all, looking gorgeous. Just a little bit of crispiness on the leaves on some of the tomato plants. Also, probably because I have to water my plants by using a water hose. I do not have drip irrigation, and I think it would just be astronomically expensive to get in here and get drip irrigation going everywhere. So I still have to water by hose, and it's very difficult to water by hose without getting some of the leaves and stuff on the tomato plants, and then that is what causes a lot of crispiness as well. So the tomato plants at the very front, they look absolutely gorgeous. I don't have a whole lot of that going on, but the ones in the middle definitely are getting it because they get the most sunlight. So definitely getting some crispiness around the bottoms of the leaves, and at least 2 of the super sauce tomato plants are looking pretty rough at this point, so I'm probably going to have to go in and trim some more limbs on those just to get those kind of straightened up, because I do have big tomatoes hanging on them. And I have noticed on those super sauce tomatoes, I mentioned that you're supposed to get tomatoes on those that are anywhere from a pound up to 4 pounds each. And I have noticed that there are some very, very big tomatoes in these. Let me see if I can zoom in so you can take a look at those. So I'm not sure if you can see them in there, but there are some really, really large tomatoes in there. And of course, some of the plants have more on them than others, and some of them are blooming more than others. So I think the one that probably has the most tomatoes on it is this one that is up front. And as you can see there, they are just hanging in gobs in that tomato plant because that one is the biggest one. And it's still blooming like crazy, so it's going to have more tomatoes that set. And at this point, I'm kind of wondering if I should maybe start trimming some of the blooms off so that way they don't set fruit, because there is so many hanging in there. I just don't want a whole lot of the energy going to those tomatoes like crazy, and then some of the younger tomatoes are smaller, or it maybe stunts the growth on the ones that are already there. So kind of keeping an eye on that. We'll see how that goes. So all in all, as far as my review on the super sauce tomatoes, my short review at this point, because this is the first year that I've tried to grow those, is they're great. I don't think they get very big. I was expecting probably a little bit bigger tomato plants. They were supposed to get 4 to 5 feet tall. Probably if I stretched them out, they would be about 4 feet tall. But all in all, I don't see a whole lot of difference from them and just a really good sized plum tomato, or any Marzano, something like that. I'm not seeing a whole lot of difference in that. So I'm not sure if I'll go with those again next season, or if I'll just go back to the beefsteak tomatoes and Roma tomatoes, because I really enjoy Roma tomatoes. I always have loads and loads of Roma tomatoes, and I'm not really sure that those have as many Roma tomatoes as I would get from my Roma plants that I had last season. So I'm just kind of curious about that. But I do have the 4 black Krim tomato plants, which are just now starting to bloom. Hopefully we'll get some tomatoes out of those before the end of the season. They better start really hurrying up if they're going to do that. But again, they're not very large plants. They had a lot of damage from the hailstorm that we had on June 8th, and they've kind of struggled since then. So I'm not real sure if we're going to get any fruit off of them. If we do, it's probably going to be very minimal at most. So not really too happy with the black Krim either, but at least I have those secondary plants. And then I have a black Prince tomato and a Cherokee purple back there that my daughter had gotten. And both of those are loaded down with tomatoes in there. And then I do have the 4 giant ox hearts tomatoes, and those plants have really surpassed the super sauce tomatoes in size. They're blooming, they're starting to set fruit. So I'm definitely liking what I'm seeing. They were really slow to get started, and they do have a long maturity date, so I'm not really sure they will work out very well for Cheyenne. At least I got them in the ground pretty early, so they did have time to really pull out and do something. However, I'm just not real sure that it would be a sustainable thing for Cheyenne, Wyoming, because we have such a short growing season. So I may replace those with either going back to beefsteaks, which I've had more success with, or with Roma tomatoes. And I did have a lot of success with some Jetstar tomatoes. The only thing I didn't like about the Jetstar tomatoes is that there seemed to be a lot of tomatoes, but they were not very large. I think the biggest one that I got, which I think that is the standard size for the Jetstars, was about 8 ounces. So not really a great slicing tomato in my opinion, and they also seemed to be pretty watery in comparison with Romas and beefsteak and, ox hearts, tomatoes that have a little bit more substance to them, which I appreciate more. So I think I'll probably go back to my other tomatoes next season, which I still have seeds from. I just decided that I wanted to try these this season. Probably wasn't a great gardening season to try that, because we're all trying to be more sustainable and grow our own food and be sustainable through the winter. But I still have tomatoes left over from last season in my pantry, canned up, and I'll be canning whatever I get out of these plants, which will probably be quite a bit. And I'm also going to be doing some sun-dried tomatoes this season, because I have loads and loads and loads of these little cherry tomatoes and pear tomatoes and the sun sugar gold. So I'll be doing a lot of that. Now, I have 3 of the German Queen tomatoes that I picked up from Walmart. And they were beautiful, beautiful plants. They got a little damage from the hailstorm because I got them right before the hailstorm. But all in all, they were still pretty much okay after the hailstorm. And I'm not really happy with them because there's not a whole lot of blooming. They're not very big plants in my opinion. And they have a kind of an entirely different leaf pattern. And they're slow growing in my opinion. And they just really haven't done a whole lot at this point. So I don't think I'll do the German Queen again, ever. I just don't really like the tomato at this point. So I'm not looking forward to really if it does anything. I hope it does something, but I'm not really sure it's going to do a whole lot of anything because there's just not a whole lot of blooms on it. There have been blooms that have came and gone, and I know that there has been bees on them, and there's pollination going on. In fact, I just had a bumblebee or a mason bee going through and pollinating right now, and they've not really been anything on them. I'm sure that I've got some crowding going on because I've got my red curry squash in here that have just really taken over. It doesn't look like I'm going to have any artichokes this year because my red curries have just, as you can see, have really just taken over any area for my artichokes whatsoever. And sometimes we have artichokes and sometimes we don't. It's iffy in this area because I'm in zone 5A, 5B, and we have late frosts. We usually are not able to get any of our plants out until the first or second week of June. And then we have snow usually coming again by mid-September. Last year it was really early by the beginning of September, right after Labor Day. So, there's a possibility that they don't come to fruition, and then that's a waste of money having plants that you don't really have anything come off of. So I just don't think I'll be going with the German Queen again. Not too worried about not having artichokes because it's pretty typical for us not to have artichokes. But I did have artichokes last year, but we had a good growing season. And all in all, I'm really happy with the garden. Really happy with all of the work that I've put into it. I've made a couple of mistakes, and there's nothing wrong with admitting when you have failures. And that was the mistake of planting the noodle beans, which just now are starting to get runners on them finally. So maybe we will get something by the end of the season, but I just think the growing season for those is way too long for this area. And a couple of times I was kind of faked out by some of the seed companies' maturity dates on their plants, because the oxheart tomato seeds that I got those on Etsy, and it said that the tomatoes were supposed to be ready in like 80 something days, and come to find out that I was looking around, the maturity on them is really closer to like 110. So not real sure that we'll get a whole lot from those oxhearts, but we do have a few tomatoes in there that are set. So looking forward to those. If they do really well, then maybe I'll plant them next year, but we'll find out, because I still have some seeds left over from them. But all in all, super sauce tomatoes, they're okay. Not my favorite. Probably will go back to Roma's. And beefsteak tomatoes. Really was looking forward to the black creme tomatoes, because I heard that they were the best tasting tomatoes. But it looks like I'm going to lose one plant here. It's just dying off for no particular reason whatsoever. And it was kind of struggling the whole time after it got hit by the hailstorm. And then the other 3 tomato plants that are black cremes in there, not sure they're going to be able to pull it out by the end of the season, because they are just way behind on growth than all the others. And all in all, I'm really happy with the cherry tomatoes and pear tomatoes that I have, because I have gobs and gobs of those hanging all over the place. And really happy with the store-bought pepper seeds that I planted. And those were ones that I just scooped out of a bell pepper that I had, and also some of those little sweet peppers that you get in a package. And I just scooped them out, dried them out, and then planted them, and they came up, and these are the plants from them. They're blooming, and I am beginning to get peppers on them. And these were all from store-bought peppers. Beautiful big plants. And even the smaller ones that I have are beginning to get peppers on them as well. And I think these are the sweet pepper, the ones that come in the packages. So they're little snacking peppers. So those are looking beautiful. And I just can't go wrong with the garden this season, except for a couple of blunders. I think the Tahitian squash may not have enough time to get ready. I also found out that they have a 110-day maturity time. So even though they look beautiful, these big, beautiful plants all around my corn, and they do have some little Tahitian squash on them, I'm not real sure that we will get them to maturity without snow flying first. So corn, really happy with. I will be going back to the early sun glow, just because of the fact that by this time I would have had corn already, because you can see the few early sun glow that were left over after the hailstorm have already tasseled. They've already got ears of corn on them that are maturing right now, versus the peaches and cream, which doesn't. So still waiting on it to tassel and do its thing. So anyway, all the container garden stuff is looking good, and I do have cantaloupe that finally pollinated and have set on the plants. So we will be getting cantaloupe from these, and I'm really looking forward to it. You can see one hanging right there. So really happy with that. Can't wait to see it come to fruition. And this is another one of those store-bought peppers that I had in a pot, and definitely lots of peppers and lots of blooms on them. So really happy with that. So anyway, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to see notices on new videos as they come out. And we will see you in the next one.